Why to Mama Tambien is a 2001 coming-of-age road movie directed by Alfonso Cuarón. It follows Julio and Tenoch, two horny teenagers running amok in Mexico City while their respective girlfriends are holidaying overseas. At a party, they meet Luisa, a sophisticated woman in her late 20s, and in a clumsy attempt at seduction, they invite her to join them on a road trip to a fictional beach called Heaven's Mouth. Louisa initially rebuffs her advances, but after learning that her husband has been cheating on her, she decides to accept the boy's offer. What follows is a silly and sensual frolic across the Mexican landscape. The three characters have incredible chemistry, and their personalities and the power dynamics shift dramatically as they grow physically and emotionally closer to one another. Likewise, as the trip progresses, we glean hidden and sometimes shocking truths about the world beyond the car windows. As with other Cuarón films, Chumam and Tambien is beautifully captured, demonstrating a lush fluidity and intimacy with the performers, punctuated by shots of breathtaking intensity. I found it to be a film full of yearning, yearning for sex, yearning for adventure, for connection, for meaning, but most of all for that fleeting thing, which is youth, which the teenagers are sort of having their last hurrah as being teenagers before they enter the world of the adults. So yeah, I really loved this film. I'd heard about it for a while, and I was really glad to have an opportunity to watch it and talk about it. So, what did you guys think of Why to Mama Tambien?
It's E.
Sorry,
Yeah,
E to Mama
each of them,
Tambien. Sorry,
yeah.
that's my mongrel English coming through.
Yeah, to your list, I'd add sexual exploration, personal exploration, and yeah, it's a great movie.
I really enjoyed this one. It was interesting, comparing the two of, especially with the filmmaking where, Roma, it's like a lot of slow panning shots, and in this one it is very chaotic and and up close at times. I feel a lot more frenetic. Um, to see
Mm.
that. So yeah, I knew going in. Obviously, I knew going in kind of the threesome nature of it all was the main thing I knew about the movie. And yeah, and obviously the kind of the intro of Diego and Gael. And I think what surprised me about the movie in a good way, and I think what I can see why it was such a big hit, because I think the key to it is actually the road trip nature of it, and kind of their seeing all of the it's a heavily kind of indigenous thing that we see in this as well, going this road trip through rural Mexico, and kind of
Mm.
just all the little moments where they kind of encounter the native people and their lives out there. It was probably the more interesting aspect of it to me.
Mm.
Even though obviously the trio is an entertaining kind of back and forth with all of them. Um, yeah, no, I found it to be a blast, and just thought the three actors were tremendous.
I agree with you, and I think that by going through all this history, like the fact that they buck conventions so much, and that Boca de Cielo, mouth of heaven, has a double meaning, especially when the men kiss. That,
Yeah.
as a patriarchy, straight hetero society, the mouth of heaven would obviously be the mouth of a woman or a woman's vagina or whatever. But like the fact that these two guys kissed in the middle of this, it's like, what is the mouth of heaven? Like,
Mm.
it's just a great film.
Yeah, there's this great sense of like liberation, I think, in the film as they're able to like, as they get further and further away from their homes, they kind of get further and further away from these kind of social expectations. Because when you first meet them, they're very typical, like chauvinistic male teenagers. They're always, objectifying women, talking about how many women they've had, what they're going to do to women. Their first interactions with Louise are very sort of almost predatory, the way they're leering over her and trying to seduce her. But the further they get away, that kind of machismo starts to break down as they bicker with one another, as they realize their kind of male code of honor has been violated, as they kind of get jealous with each other over Louisa's affections. And I think Louisa, as an adult, calls them out on this like juvenile behavior, and says, I love her line, play with babies, all you end up is doing is wiping them.
Right, yeah.
And you obviously you just want to have sex with each other, which of course she's right about. I think that idea of liberating yourself from the shackles of those kind of gender expectations and social expectations and class divisions, like we see them in quite privileged positions in society, as they kind of, not that they're necessarily like taking any great lessons from the poverty and the fragments of life that they pass, like they're all kind of oblivious to that, but just that idea of getting away from those things and coming to this kind of just Edenic paradise beach and giving into those kinds of pleasure rather than being shaped by social expectations, I found like really emotional and intense. And I think that was really well portrayed. And ultimately, they never quite get away from it. They have that one night where they embrace and kiss and have sex and give in to passion and desire. But as soon as they wake up, the spell is kind of broken. So maybe you can never really get away from it, but it's the kind of that dream, that mythical heaven's mouth that you can sort of dream of escape.
Yeah, there's a similar film called Before the Night Falls, and it's about the Cuban Revolution and how very, very post-revolution, all the intellectuals, the homosexuals, were super excited because they're no longer under the yoke of this authoritarian, that they could express themselves openly, and then the reality of the situation comes crashing down. And then, but before that, there's this moment of ecstasy, and I feel like that's that night where the guys kiss, and then the next morning the other guy's throwing up, right? There's this realization that what they were looking forward to, what they just did, is not acceptable in the world that they actually live in.
The hangover after the revolution.
Before Night Falls.
And what did you guys think of Louisa and her journey and the kind of revelation of what is actually going on? That this is her last kind of month or two alive, and that's why she decides to go on this road trip. How did you think that was played?
I admittedly looked that up beforehand, so I kind of like had that in my mind as I was watching the film. So I mean I did enjoy doing that, kind of being able to view it through the lens of knowing. But I wouldn't have, it's a different experience than I imagined from what you guys had.
Mm-hmm.
I would think that was her last hurrah, right? She found out that her husband was cheating on her.
Mm.
Again, there's no reason to be like the Madonna or the whore.
Yep. Yep. Once you know you're going to die, there's no reason to keep playing a role or living a lie. Just do what you want to do, I guess. And I think that's kind of part of it as well. Like the theme of sex and sort of love of life is a big part of this film. But I also think death. You see a lot of death in the film. There's references to like road accidents that have happened in the past, and you see the police detaining Indigenous people, and there's allusions to the social turmoil that is happening in Mexican society at the end of the 20th century, but also references to the past. You hear about what's going to happen in the future to some of these beautiful characters that they meet. And that idea that, everything changes and you never know what's going to happen can be paralyzing and very frightening, and mean that you don't want to do anything and live in fear and hide away. Or it means, you live life to the fullest while you can. You can sort of respond to that finite, or that kind of shadow of death and shadow of mortality in different ways, I guess. And Louisa responds to it by just embracing life and living for pleasure and going to see the world around her, looking for beauty, whereas the teenagers struggle to escape that and confront that and end up just kind of doing what their parents want them to do. One of the characters ends up doing economics, studying economics, even though he previously said he has no interest in that and wants to be a writer. They talk about one of their friends who's come out as gay and are quite supportive of him, but they struggle to take that step to explore their own bisexuality. So yeah, it's quite a sad ending, I guess, in that sense. The final shot, I felt quite bad for them,
And I think
where he watches his friend walk away, and he looks quite anguished.
I think what you just said about just, living life or, making the most of it while you can, wasn't, I mean, not necessarily explored in the movies that we looked at today, but as far as, the rise of cartel violence, it's a very viable way for these young men who may not have any other opportunities to make money, do awful things, and eventually die young. And they know they will, regardless if they, if they, do kill and accept the cartel money or not. It's likely that they'll die young, and they're just trying to make the best of it right now.
Oh yes, certainly the threat of death can lead to very bad decisions as well. You can be like, oh, if I'm going to die, I might as well make money and exploit people, and it can definitely lead to bad paths as well. Yeah, but it's I guess it's just reality for a lot of people who can't necessarily change their circumstances they live in. Okay, so before we close out our discussion, I was interested in if you guys had any other Mexican films that you'd like to recommend to the listener.
More Desperos.
Yeah, what's that film about, Varley?
Oh God, I haven't watched it in so long. So it's Gael Garcia Bernal and his friends, and they are caught up in a dogfight, and basically it is just trying to get out of a slum through dogfighting, but also this relationship that he has with this woman, and the whole Amores Perros is basically translated to dog lovers, but if you break amor and S up, it's loves a bitch. Or I guess you could say it's bitch lovers. um, it's almost the same thing as Maria Candelaria when their dog is killed, like their piglet's killed, and they saw that as their one way to get out of this fucking, slum.
Yeah, I watched this film recently for the first time just to learn a bit more about Mexican films, and I thought it was incredible. I love this film. It's a pretty violent crime film. It's kind of like an ensemble cast film. I call them like hyperlink films, where it's like a bunch of characters all kind of living in the same area, and they're kind of connected in various ways. You kind of see it in like Tarantino movies and Guy Ritchie
So it is
films.
like Crash
But
in that
those
sense,
films are more
right?
those films are more, yeah, absolutely, yeah. These kind of various people living different lives that intersect in different ways. But the Tarantino and the Guy Ritchie are far more comedic, whereas Amoris Perros is much more serious. So you've got the dogfighting storyline, and then you've got another storyline about a model who gets really injured in a car crash, and her life
Oh,
after
and her
that.
dog gets eaten
And
by
then you've
rats or
got this
something
kind
like
of,
that.
well, not exactly, but not exactly. But that is what she's afraid has happened. And then there's like a sort of a ex-gorilla and his life and his relationship to his daughter. And Iñárritu would go on to have success in Hollywood with Babel and 21 Grams, which have a similar sort of hyperlink style of filmmaking. Any other
So
recommendations for
I
Mexican
don't
films, or even just films
I
you'd
don't
want to
know
watch?
if Robert Rodriguez counts as Mexican films. I know he's Mexican American. I don't know if he's Mexican of origin. But he did the Once Upon a Time in
Mhm.
Mexico trilogy, if you like, El Mariachi, Desperado, and Once Upon a Time in Mexico. Fistful of Mexico dollars. I don't know
Mhm.
if they call it. But I love that trilogy.
It's full of
Yeah, right.
pesos.
I love that. I love his filmmaking style in that trilogy. I think it's almost choreographed to the music that's happening rather than to what natural people would move like. Obviously, I love Salma Hayek. to this day. And it's just a great bunch of films, but it's about narco trafficking and vigilantism and all these things that exist, and to some degree, and other tropes in some of the movies that we've looked at today.
I think El Mariachi is a American production, but it's in Spanish and it's set in Mexico, so I think that would count.
Yeah, that trilogy is excellent. But yeah, I'm kind of like a similar thing, where it's just like the ones I like are, I mean, they're actually American productions. It's like the Traffic, Sicario, No Country for Old Men trio that it's set around there, but it's still an American film.
Yeah, and seeing that's where I just suggest like just look into. I mean, you can start with these 4 films, obviously, but just look into any and all that interests you and watch them. You can have an entry point as low as Coco or as much as interest in an actor, and just dive down deep. You'll find some.
I wouldn't consider Coco low at all.
No, exactly.
Coco was really good.
It's just popular, so it's just easy to dump in there and be like, oh yeah, if you like Coco, pick any actor from that film. You can find any of their films. It's a good entryway.
Yeah, and it's a good entryway to show that how indigenous culture is mixed with Catholic Christianity, and even though they have this Day of the Dead, which is quote, air quote again, pagan holiday, is fine and recognized in Mexico and has been for a long time. In fact, Mexico now has legal abortion for everyone, despite being a very heavily Roman Catholic country. So there's progress.
I guess for me, I'd like to check out some of Guillermo del Toro's Mexican films. I feel like all of his really successful films have been set either in America or Spain with Pan's Labyrinth, but he did make some films in Mexico, like Kronos from '95. I'd like to check out that film. There's an Iñárritu film called Beautiful.
Can you imagine how fucked up they are
to see?
Like, if you had to tone it down for the mainstream.
Well, I'm happy to watch. I don't mind a bit of gruesomeness. And this is an earlier director from the '70s, but Alejandro Jodorowsky made a few big sort of experimental films like El Topo, which is described as an acid western, and then The Holy Mountain, which seems really out there, like really surrealist, but I'd like to check those out because they're quite big. And I know him from this documentary about this unmade Dune film, Jodorowsky's Dune, which is an awesome film about a film that was never made because it was too out there. But a lot of the creators behind that film went on to make other important sci-fi films like Alien and Blade Runner and things like that.
Very cool.
Yes, but lots of great films for people to check out. That brings us to the end of this installment of the Movie Passport, but let us know what you thought of the episode and if you have any other Mexican movie recommendations. And let us know what other world movies you'd like us to discuss. You can leave comments or questions on our WordPress page or join us on the Vassals of Kingsgrave Discord server. I'd like to thank my fellow hosts for this episode, including Varley, Zander, and Matt. And thank you for listening. Goodbye, or as the Mexicans say, adios.